Okay, well, welcome to Life Without Resentment. Better health and relationships, more interest and enjoyment. How's that for a guarantee? You know, in all the years I've been practicing, once my clients realize that chronic resentment is what keeps them stuck in the depressive, angry, or anxious states that brought them into treatment, it's not what caused those things, but it keeps them stuck in those symptoms. Once they realize that, these are the questions they ask. Isn't my resentment valid? Isn't it justified? Once and for all, please understand your resentment is valid and justified. But these are answers to the wrong questions. You certainly have a right to your resentment. The right questions are, is resentment helping me be the person, spouse, or parent I most want to be? Do I want to be resentful? Do I want to live my life that way? Because resentment can take over your life. Resentment is the road to bad sex. Most sex problems in relationships are resentment. A good sex life requires letting down defenses, and resentment doesn't really let you do that. It leads to failure at work, school, relationships, depression and anxiety, aggressive driving, community breakdown, illness, violence, and shortened lifespan. So resentment is related to all of those things. The motivation of resentment is to avoid. That's withdrawal, interest, and enjoyment. So if you're resentful, you don't want to invest interest in anything, and as a consequence, you don't enjoy very much. Or attack. So it's either avoid or attack. Now the attack can be overt, you're actually devaluing someone, or covert, passive aggressive. In intimate relationships, I think it's more often passive aggressive. In the short run, resentment robs life of happiness. It creates a joyless drive to get things done. So you can function with resentment because it has adrenaline, but you don't enjoy very much, and you aren't interested in very much. So it's hard to be happy when you're not have very little enjoyment or interest. In the long run, it drains life of conviction, passion, purpose, and meaning. Now, here's half the truth. Resentment is a perception of unfairness for not getting desired respect, help, appreciation, consideration, reward, apology, understanding, or sympathy. The whole truth, resentment makes us unfair. So we have a perception of unfairness, but in fact, when we're resentful, we're almost always unfair ourselves. It's contagious. It passes workstation by workstation throughout the company, locker by locker across the school, car by car down the road. Early aggressive driving studies showed that when people were stopped for aggressive driving violations, like cutting off or weaving in and out of traffic, someone had done the same thing to them a few cars down the road. So it's very contagious. If you're around resentful people, you're likely to get resentful. And of course, room by room at home, it's probably most contagious at home. So you get this endless flow of resentment where it can start in one arena and spill into the others. So if you encounter a jerk on the road, you're not going to be sweet when you get home or at work to school. Or it can start at work or at school. It's going to affect how you drive and how you get home. It's a general central nervous system response. It's not specific, so it's going to generalize to everything, not just what caused it. Resentment in the workplace is the hidden cause of most failure. It increases error rates, deteriorates judgment, breeds stagnation, spite, infighting, backstabbing, burnout, and sabotage. All of those are resentment is a precursor of all of those, and prepares the way for violence. I used to actually make a lot of money lecturing companies about workplace violence, which is very rare, by the way. Workplace violence is usually a spillover from domestic violence. But it was very easy to earn the money. I would just say, look for the resentful people, and then if something unexpected happens to them, like they get fired or they don't get a raise, that's when they're going to be a higher risk of violence. But you can see it coming if you look for the resentment. Now, linked to substance abuse, the sour mood of resentment cries out for alteration. So chronic resentment will usually have somebody drinking too much or using too many mood altering drugs. Altering drugs, I should say. Most people with high levels of resentment abuse substances. Resentment makes recovery painful. So if you do become addicted and you start to recover, it's going to be much more difficult. And relapse is likely if resentment persists. Most alcohol and drug programs will target resentment because they know how likely it is to predict recidivism. Or resentment in education, if your kids are resentful, resentment is a primary learning inhibitor. You're shutting out things that you decide you don't want to learn. It's a cause of teacher burnout, cause of dropout, contributor to racism, sexism, and narcissism, and cause of bullying and violence. So it wreaks havoc in school as well as at work and at home. Resentment in driving. Distorts depth perception. You know, the aggressive driving violations are things like cutting off and tailgating, because they're misjudging distances. Makes the foot heavier on the gas. Degrades fine motor skills. Deteriorates good judgment. So that's how it affects driving. Resentment in health. I said this, but it's worth repeating. It shortens your lifespan. It increases the risk of heart disease and hypertension, stroke, cancer, depression and anxiety, alcoholism and drug addiction, and compulsive behavior. Resentment in relationships, the heart disease of families, destroys trust and intimacy, creates continual power struggles or persistent passive aggression, and eventually leads to contempt, disgust, detachment. So if you are not regulating resentment with compassion, kindness, it will eventually lead to contempt, disgust, and detachment. It is degenerative. It doesn't get better on its own. Now, the chain of resentment. Events and behavior of others are never the whole problem, never more than links on the chain of resentment. The chain of resentment is self-linking. Present injustices link onto past ones and extend well into the past and into the future. The chain of resentment takes on a life of its own. You actually start to look for things to resent. If you understand the function of it, it's protecting you from being disappointed. So you anticipate that you're going to be disappointed, that you're going to be let down, and then that becomes self-fulfilling prophecy because you're always looking for evidence of it. So in that sense, resentment breeds resentment. Resentment breeds entitlement. I deserve this with all I have to put up with. It's so hard being me, I shouldn't have to wait in traffic too. So you feel more entitled when you're resentment because it feels pretty bad most of the time. And of course, if you're over 5 and not cute anymore, the world's not going to meet your entitlement needs. So you're going to get more resentful. It breeds jealousy. Resentful people have a higher incidence of jealousy. You must want someone else because the resentful me can't be enough for you. So you must want someone else. It breeds envy. If I had what he has, I would feel better. I wouldn't be resentful. Or I deserve what they have more than they do. So it's a natural breeder of envy. It breeds victim identity, identifying the self as damaged by the behavior of others. See, damage is different from hurt. We can certainly be hurt by the behavior of others, but damage is irreparable. Also, it keeps you focused on weaknesses, on the effects of the damage. To heal and grow, you need to focus on your strengths and resilience. Resentment breeds enemies. It's hard to be friendly to resentful people. Other people view your resentment as a form of rejection or aggression. So when you're resentful, you're going to get more and more negative responses from other people. Rarely will resentment garner a compassionate or caring response. So you get this relentless feedback loop. Resentment breeds entitlement, and entitlement causes more resentment because you're going to be disappointed in your entitlement. It breeds jealousy, and then the jealousy breeds more resentment, envy, victim identity, enemies. It's a relentless feedback loop. Okay, now let's get to breaking the chain, what we can do about it. Those of you who've been to our boot camp are familiar with this. I've got you all on mute now because of this presentation, but you say it out loud anyway. Repeat after me. My emotional well-being is important to me. So say that out loud.
My emotional well-being
More important than everything I resent.
More important than everything I resent.
More important than other people's bad behavior. Now, if you're like most groups, your conviction level went down on that third one because that sounds like you're letting someone off the hook. And that's really the self-damage the resentment does. It makes other people's behavior more important than your own emotional well-being. It's self-devaluing. It always has self-blame in it. Why did I trust them? How could I have been that stupid? But it's self-devaluing because it denigrates your own emotional well-being. Now, the choices when it comes to well-being, there's only one real choice: increasing the value of your experience or decreasing it. That's creating value or resentment. Everything that you resent, you could also and use that resentment to increase the value of your experience. And everything you value can turn into resentment. If you value more than you devalue, your life is great. So if you have a lot of value, resentment's going to be really low. But if you don't, if you devalue more than you value, and that's what you're doing with resentment, you're continually devaluing, the value of your life is going to be low. Let me emphasize that last point. Suppose you woke up this morning with everyone in your house you thought was a valuable, important person. You probably believe that of your family, but you don't often feel it. But this morning you did. You were out on the road, no jerks. Everybody was a valuable and important person. All of your neighbors are valuable and important. Everybody you encountered today was a valuable and important person. If that were your experience, you would feel pretty darn good right now. But if you woke up with people you resent, you resented your neighbors or they resented you for not taking your trash cans or something like that, you're nothing but jerks on the road. People are talking about you. People are disappointing you. People are treating you unfairly. Your experience now would be you'd be depressed if you were an internalizer, or resentful and angry if you're an externalizer. So valuing or versus devaluing controls your emotional well-being. If you value more than you devalue, your life will be good, even if a lot of bad things happen. And if you devalue more than you value, life will be good. Or I'm sorry, if you devalue more than you value, life will be bad, even if a lot of good things happen. Now, the secret of success, and you figured this out when you get into a new job or a new relationship, you automatically create value of the things you need to do. You just do it automatically, or you'd have been fired from the job, or the relationship wouldn't have lasted. We only forget when resentment sets in. We see, when you first start a new job or a new relationship, you're looking for things to value. You're looking to increase value. But then when resentment starts to set in, you're doing just the opposite. You're looking for things to devalue. Okay, the powerlessness of resentment. Power is making your experience better in the real world. And powerlessness and resentment is powerlessness. It's making yourself miserable because the real world isn't the way it should be. Resentment's the tyranny of the shoulds. You know, you're always thinking it shouldn't be that way, it should be this way, it should be fair, it should be that way. The Buddha said almost 3,000 years ago that most of the suffering in the world comes from wishing it were not the way it is. But now he thought you just have to accept the way it is. I think accept and improve will make your life much better. Don't waste your energy railing against the way it is. Accept the way it is and then improve it. You can't improve it if you don't accept it. You'll be wasting your energy negating the way it is, but that doesn't change it. The powerlessness is powerlessness is focused on what you cannot do. Whenever you focus on what you can't do, you feel powerless. So people get so angry about politics. They're really powerless over it. You're empowered when you focus on what you can do, specifically improve and appreciate. Those are things that are entirely within your power. Now, improve doesn't mean fix. Improving is incremental. Improve the situation if you can, or your experience of the situation. My example of that is if you're sitting in traffic and running late, you can't improve that situation. You can't make the traffic move, but you can improve how you experience it. I am going to accept that I'm sitting in traffic, and now I'm going to make it better for myself by putting on music that I like, or listening to a book on tape, making a phone call, thinking about some problem I have to solve, using the time productively or pleasantly. That's an example of improving. I can't fix it, but I can make it better. Our brains function at our best when they're focused on improving. Here's an exercise that you could do after the presentation. Write down one thing you can do to improve, not necessarily fix, your experience of something you resent. So think of something you resent and write down just one thing you can do to make it a little better. And you'll see that empowers you, puts you more into a solution finding part of your brain, takes you out of the devaluing part. Appreciation reduces resentment. Failure to appreciate increases it. In other words, there's not much neutral. You're either appreciating or you're devaluing, because avoiding itself is devaluing. See, avoid in the social context is usually neutral. You're avoiding people on the street because you can't connect with everyone. But in any kind of close relationship, avoidance, it will increase resentment. So appreciation reduces it, failure to appreciate increases it. So write down one aspect of something or someone you resent that you can appreciate more. Even if you don't like what that person's doing, there's something about them you might be able to appreciate, and you'll see how that changes your whole perspective. So try it after the presentation. Think about it. Now, valuing the tasks you need to do. This is a key thing if you're resentful, especially at work. Be clear on why performing necessary tasks honors your deeper values. See, every job has things that you have to do that you don't want to do. For mine, it's filling out forms. I hate doing that, but I usually have to do it. Sweeping the floor for your family's well-being makes more sense than doing it for your boss's personal power trip. So you're going to feel awfully bad if you think you've got to fill out forms or sweep the floor because your boss is making you do it. But if you see, I'm doing this to support my family, I'm doing this so my family can be comfortable, can have things that they need and things that they desire, that gives you meaning and purpose. So the tasks that you need to do that you don't want to do, you got to figure out how they click into your core value. Now identify a deeper value that will give you a greater energy and focus to do a task you need to do but don't want to do. So identify that task that you need to do but don't want to do, and then identify a deeper value that will give you more energy and focus. And examples would be some kind of basic humanity. Those are compassion, kindness, affection, something for your family, your growth and development, appreciation, so forth. Briefly describe something you resent about your partner's behavior, or if you don't have a partner, your child's or a parent or a close friend. So think of something you resent about your partner. Now then consider, how significant is this resentment in the wider picture of your life? See, one of the ironies of resentment is because it's a chain, there are a few links on that chain that are very serious. There are things like deceit, injustice, betrayal. But most of the links on the chain are very trivial. And the problem with resentment, if you pick up a chain by one link, whether it's a small link or a big link, you're holding the weight of the whole chain, not just that one link. So every little event can seem important because of the resentment. But when you back up and see how significant is this in the wider picture of my life, you'll see that it isn't really. When you look at the wider picture of your life, you get into more meaning and purpose. When you look at details, it's easier to fall into resentment. So list 3 things more important to you than this resentment that you would, 3 things that you would rather think about. In other words, you don't want to waste your thoughts and energy on this thing you resent. What are 3 things you'd rather think about that are really more important to your life? Now, increase the value of your experience by 5% and start with self-value. That's the experience of your humanity. The greatest thing you can do for your self-value is feel more humane, and that comes from the experience of compassion and kindness, being compassionate and kind to others, affectionate to others, looking out for other people's well-being. That's the best thing you can do for your self-value. And it's complicated why. I wrote a book about it years ago, but it was instrumental in early human survival that we had to hunt and fight collectively. We had to risk our lives for others. So your sense of personal well-being goes up when you focus on the well-being of others, and goes down with self-obsession. Your desire to focus on your desire to heal, correct, improve, create, repair, renew, grow, and build. Whenever you think of how you can do any of those, you increase your self-value. In any public place, mentally transmit value, respect, and kindness. You don't have to say anything. Just when you're in a grocery store, just think value, kindness, respect to everyone you see. Whether they behave well or not, recognize the capacity of everyone to form emotional bonds. They might be a jerk at this moment, but they're able to form emotional bonds. They're able to be compassionate and kind, even if they're not at this moment. They're able to heal, correct, improve, create, repair, renew, grow, and build, even if they're not doing those things at this moment. Now, you're not doing this for them. You're doing it for your own emotional well-being. If you focus on raising the value of your experience, your life will be better. While walking down the street, regard everyone you pass with value and respect. In fact, you can do this little experiment. If you're walking down the street, it's better to do it in a city where there's people walking by you. Before you start, do a little mood introspection. Just think what my current level of mood is. 10 is I'm about to enter the gates of heaven. 1, I'm about to commit suicide. Most of us will be 5 on that scale. And then as you're walking down the street, you don't have to even make eye contact. You just think everyone you're passing is a valuable and important person. And after a couple of blocks of doing that, do that little mood introspection again. And you should notice it, that it's up a notch just by thinking that everyone you pass is a valuable and important person. Now, list subtle ways you can spread light in the web of emotion that connects us all. Now, let me explain that. Web of emotion is, research on emotion shows that they're more contagious than any known virus. Unfortunately, the negative emotions are more contagious than the positive ones, but the positive ones are contagious too. And we live in a web of emotion. When you interact with someone, you are downloading their emotional state and you're passing part of your emotional state onto them, and they are passing on what you pass on to them to the next person they encounter, and so forth until we form this large web. Now, the web is strongest in closest proximity, but it keeps going. It gets amplified in some people, muted in others, but it keeps going. Now, in that web of emotion, if you don't upload, I call it light, compassion, kindness, you're almost certainly going to download resentment. So list subtle ways that you can spread light in the web of emotion. One is make gentle eye contact. Smile slightly, just very slight smile. Think of valuable and important person. Think compassion, kindness. Imagine each person helping someone. I personally believe, and this is going beyond the data. I mean, there's a lot of data about emotion contagion, but this hasn't been studied, so I'm giving you my personal opinion now. I think that when we are injecting a lot of negativity into that web, we are inadvertently contributing to things like child abuse. Because if you are devaluing or disrespecting someone, they're probably going to devalue and disrespect someone else who will disrespect them back, and they're going to take that home, and a very small percentage of those are going to abuse those children. That's the bad news. The good news, if you treat them with value and respect, they're more likely to treat their children well. So that's a big motivator for me, protecting children by treating everybody with value and respect. And I do believe, although there's no compelling data to support it, there's some, but not compelling data. I believe that that web of emotion is very powerful, and everything we do matters. Everything we do has some effect on someone else. Okay. On your smartphone, record a reminder that each time you have a compassionate or kind thought. So every time you have a compassionate, kind thought, just hit that little button on your reminder in your smartphone, and you'll see how they accumulate. Each time you perform a compassionate or kind act, record it. It's easy with smartphones now. You don't have to take out pencil and paper and write it. You can just push a little button. The surest path to happiness, what you can do to make yourself happy with the greatest certainty, is treat them well. And in this order: family, friends, neighbors, strangers, animals, the planet. We cannot let go of resentment. That's kind of the bottom line of this whole presentation. You hear that all the time. Just let go of resentment. You can't let it go because it keeps coming back. It's a defensive system. We have to crowd it out by creating more value in our lives. See, devaluing is incompatible with valuing. The more you value, the less able to devalue you are. So instead of focusing on what you resent, focus on building value in your life. You will create a lot more endorphins in your brain, and you're going to like the way you feel. Okay, thank you for your attention.